Hi, this is David Pratt, the Thunderdome podcast, where we talk Virginia politics. Let's get going. Here with Edwin Santana. Hey, Edwin.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. And the format, as I mentioned, is 3 5-minute rounds. Start with your personal history, and then your professional background, and then 5 minutes on the campaign. Okay? Tell me where you are from originally.
So I was born in Florida, but I grew up in a small town in Maine called Thorndike.
And what was that like?
It was a lot like parts of the 1st Congressional District. It was very rural. It was very poor. I went to a K through 12 school. Not a lot going on there, and everybody who went to college eventually left. So, like I did with my family. So,
would you say that had a formative effect on your worldview, being from a place that's poorer?
Yeah, definitely. Where I grew up gave me a lot of the passions and the interests that I have today and things that I want to fight for and improve. When I talk about building an economy for everybody, I'm thinking about a lot of the people that I left behind in Maine, who are where I'm from. When I talk about expanding funding for public schools and making them better, I'm thinking about the public school experience that I had, the tiny school that I went to with not a lot of funding. Again, like you said, it helped formed the things I want to fight for today.
How did you get out of that place, and where did you go after Maine?
So I was very lucky. I had a friend of mine. He was like, "Hey, man, I'm going to join the Marine Corps. Why don't you join with me?" And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds pretty cool." So we went and took the ASFAB, which is like the SAT for joining the military, to see what jobs you qualify for, and I did pretty good on it. And the recruiter came to me and said, "Hey, have you ever thought about being an officer?" And I said, "I don't even know what that is." And he's like, "Well, we would get you into this program where it would pay for your school, and after you go to school, then you would serve as an officer, and that's how you pay back your commitment." I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds great. Going to college up front, it's not something I was going to do, but that sounds awesome." Lo and behold, I was one of 2 people in the state of Maine to win that scholarship that year, and I got a full ride to Maine Maritime Academy where I did ROTC. I met my wife. I got my college degree there. I got commissioned as a 2nd lieutenant and left Maine. I've spent my time either in California where I was stationed or here in Virginia.
Camp Pendleton, right?
Yep, in Camp Pendleton, California. It's in San Diego County.
And along the way, you had 2 kids, because I've seen the picture of them.
Yeah, so I got my 2-year-old son. He just turned 2 yesterday on December 28th. So he's crazy. He's Edwin Santana III, named after my father and me. And we had our daughter Valerie. She's our campaign baby. She was born May 10th of this year. So I got a son born in a naval hospital in California, and my daughter born this year in Fort Belvoir here in Virginia.
So you're a second, and he's a third. What does that mean to be a second and a third of a family surname?
It's something I'm proud of. I love my dad. I think he's a great man, and I've always had my name with pride, even though I don't know a lot of Edwins. And I hope my son looks at it the same way, something he can be proud of, especially if we're able to be successful here. I hope that he kind of sees that name, and it's something he's proud of, what his father's able to do, and I hope it inspires him to do important things too. And I hope he keeps the name going, to be honest. I want to see the 4th, the 5th, the 6th. I think that'd be pretty cool.
That'd be fun. So you live in, where do you live?
I live in Stafford.
Stafford.
Yep.
Where is that located on the map for us?
So the most northern part of the district is Prince William County, and that's like a half hour from Washington, D.C. It's half hour south. I live in Stafford, which is just outside of Marine Corps Base Quantico, where my wife is stationed. She is a captain in the Marines still. She's lucky. When we first moved here, her commute to work was about 12 minutes, and I was commuting an hour south to my job. But, hey, you do things for your wife sometimes. So.
Right. Do you like where you live?
Yeah, I like where we live. It's a nice community. You can get to D.C. in about an hour. It's a growing community. There's so many people coming there. It's diverse. The schools are great, and it's a good place to raise a family.
What do you do in your free time?
In my free time, I like to read. I don't have as much free time as I used to have because I still work full time. I've got my 2 kids, my wife, and now I'm doing the campaign. So I read when I can, and other than that, I'm busy most of the time.
Do you read fiction or nonfiction?
I read mostly nonfiction. I'm a big history buff. I just finished, what was the name of the book? The New Jim Crow, which was enlightening. I've been burning through audiobooks too since I've been commuting a long way, so that's kind of how I get my reading fix too, is on the drive.
I'm listening to Jim Crow right now, and the New Jim Crow right now.
It's a great book.
It's very good. As you think about the people you've known in your life, is there someone that stands out? You mentioned your father, but is either him or someone else that inspired you?
Ooh. I'm gonna go with my wife. My wife and I, our stories are so similar. We've done a lot. We went to the same school on the same scholarship. We had the same job while we were in the military. But my wife, if she was running as a candidate today, I think I'd have a tough time beating her because she is just so good at everything she does, from being a wife to a mother to a Marine. She pushes me to do better, and I've known her. Our anniversary is tomorrow, and that'll be 6 years married, and we've been together almost a decade now, and I spent the last 10 years of my life just trying to learn from her and trying to be a better man.
So Marine, two Marines. When I meet a Marine, it does feel like it's core to somebody's identity, right?
Yep.
Tell us what it means to be a Marine.
So being a Marine, we have our core values of honor, courage, and commitment, and that's something it's pushed into you so hard. I got almost all of my leadership experience since I was starting in college to my time in the military, and I try and live out those ideas now. Again, like you said, if someone's a Marine for life. I could walk into a group of Marines today, and we would still share that same bond, and it's something that's pretty amazing. And I think the Marine Corps, more than any other branch that I've seen, we are students of history. I know that I was able to accomplish the things that I was able to accomplish in the military because of the men and women who fought and died in Iwo Jima or in Khe Sanh or in Iraq and Fallujah and all these other places. So that's one of the most important parts about being a Marine, is just remembering kind of where you came from and trying to make things better for the people who come after you. And I still have that idea now in my congressional run. I remember where I came from back in Maine, and I want to make things better for people going forward too.
Mm-hmm. How do the Marines instill leadership in people? Like, what do they do?
So in officer candidate school, the motto there is Ductus Exemplo, and that's lead by example. So anything that I had ever asked my Marines to do, it's something that I would do myself as well. Something that I would be willing to put my body in the way and do. And that's also the same approach that I'm taking in my congressional run. I try and be everywhere. I was at the Women's March on Washington. I took part in the Charlottesville March on D.C. to combat white supremacy. I go to as many of these meetings, rallies, and stuff as possible, trying to show people like, hey, as your representative, I'm going to be there, and I'm not going to do anything, or I wouldn't vote for anything that I wouldn't be happy feeling the effects from. Because you hear a lot of people talk about like, hey, maybe congressmen should have the same health care that we all have, and then maybe they'd vote a little bit differently. And I believe that that's a great idea. As your representative, you need to represent the people, your constituents, and we can't ever forget that.
Right. So when you were in the military, what rank were you?
I got out as a first lieutenant.
First lieutenant?
Yes,
and
sir.
then what does that job entail, and how does that translate to an experience that helps you prepare for being a congressman?
So I was a unit supply officer. That was my military occupational specialty, and my wife actually has the same one. And my responsibilities, I was in charge of accounting of all military equipment, to include weapons, tanks, vehicles, ammunition. But I was also the unit fiscal officer. I managed the unit's budget. So I've dealt with multi-million-dollar budgets. I've had to use those funds in accordance with the laws, because there's a lot of strict ways that you can use that federal money. And that experience, it's been very helpful in the congressional run, because I have a lot of attention to detail. I do all of our FEC reporting, because I was used to doing a lot of that budgeting and stuff when I was in the military. Now I take that same approach to making sure that we do everything right in the way we're supposed to.
And where do you work now?
So I'm actually transitioning jobs. I'm going to be moving to become a logistics consultant for a different company, kind of combining my military experience. And they do a lot of DoD work, so I'll be working with Marines again, which will be nice.
Yeah, logistics seems to be a career path for a lot of people after they leave the military.
Yeah, it is, because logistics, that you can't really do anything without it, and you can't do anything without it in the military and in a campaign as well. You talk about building a campaign from the grassroots up. You're talking about logistics there.
The idea of leadership, when I think of Congress, I don't think of the average congressperson as leaders. I see them as followers of like Paul Ryan or whoever the head of their
Or
party.
special interests.
Yeah, so as you think about yourself in Congress, are you going to be a leader or a follower?
All right, that's a softball question. I definitely plan to be a leader. Like I said, ductus exemplo means to lead by example, and that's what I intend to do. I think you've seen there's much fewer veterans serving in Congress than in the past, and I think you kind of see that in how our politics are going now. So I think once you start to get some veterans back in there, people who have had real leadership experience, they haven't spent the last few decades of their life answering to special interests in D.C. I think once you get that, and again, something that's very important to the Marine Corps, I'm there to kind of serve my Marines, to help them get the job done. And I want to take that same approach as a congressman. I'm there to serve the people who, not only the people who voted for me, but all the men and women who live in the district. I think that's extremely important. So you hear a lot of the time, I mean, Donald Trump is convinced that every member of Congress works for him. Well, that's just not true. We work for the men and women who live in the district that elected us to that office.
Right. What prompted you to run? Was it Trump being elected?
In part, a huge part of my life has been service to others. I did Big Brother, Big Sister when I was in college. I did that on active duty. I was a chaplain's assistant to young Marine recruits going through boot camp in California. I served as a Marine. I served my country there. And then when I got out of the Marine Corps, I realized, again, I got out in September of 2016. The election happened in November, and I realized, okay, this is how I can serve my country best now. That's part of it. The other part, like you said, is Donald Trump. I realized, thankfully, I got out of the Marine Corps because I couldn't serve in the military where Donald Trump was my boss. I think that he is the absolute opposite of all of the leadership values that are instilled in us. I don't think that he embodies any of them. And I realized we need some new leadership. We need some fresh air in Congress and in government because we're going in the wrong direction right now.
Yeah. I'm a little concerned about the people that are leaving serving in the government because it's so onerous. They're making it so hard. But is there a risk that people will leave the FBI, will leave these agencies, and we're going to give the keys to the madmen?
Yeah, honestly, I don't think that's something really to be too worried about. If I just look back in the Marine Corps, I know that not everybody there shared the same political views that I had, but all of them served the Constitution. Were there to serve their country, and I believe that every Marine and by extension, members of the FBI, most of the staffers and people who work in D.C., not necessarily elected officials, all of them are usually career people who are there because they want to make the institutions better. Unfortunately, you get someone like Donald Trump, who, by the way our government's set up, he's put at the top of that institution. But most of the people who are there getting the work done every single day, they're people who are there to make the country better. So I don't get as worried about that. I think, yeah, it is a problem. You see a brain drain from like the EPA and stuff like that. That's something that's going to be very hard to fix, but I'm not worried about the FBI. I think the men and women who work there, they're professionals, and they're there to equally serve the law and to keep our country safe.
Right. Let's turn now to where you stand on some issues. And I've heard you speak before, and you talked about a range of issues, but if you were to, let's start with one, like what's your like number one most important issue that you think we need to address and that you think you can make an impact with?
To me, the number one issue is healthcare. I think that we're taking steps in the right direction underneath the Affordable Care Act. That was a good start. We need to continue to improve upon that. I support the efforts right now in Congress for single payer, Medicare for all. I think that once the blue wave comes in 2018, whether we take back the House, the Senate, definitely the presidency in 2020, that will be the next step. Americans already pay $3.4 trillion a year in healthcare costs. The highest estimate by a nonpartisan group on how much the Medicare for all bill would cost is $2.8 trillion. So that's $600 billion a year in savings that we could apply to other things. So by addressing this healthcare issue, not only will we save the country a bunch of money, every man, woman, and child will have access to healthcare, so we don't have to hear these horror stories about CHIP not being funded and what are we going to do to take care of our elderly. That problem solved because every man and woman will be insured through the federal government. Again, then you can take those savings and start to apply those to other things. We had questions on the AMA earlier today about universal pre-K or how do we get kids childcare? How do we improve our public education system? We can do that with savings through the Medicare for All program, and that's something that I will fight for.
Are you concerned with this tax bill passing, that now they're going to turn their attention to saying, oh, the deficit is worse now, right? Because we have less revenue coming in, so we need to cut entitlements. I mean, I've already heard that.
That's a guarantee. They're going to start working on that. The real question is, it took them a year to get this tax bill. We need to delay this as long as we can, so that way, come January of 2019, when a ton of new congressmen and senators are sworn in, they can put that agenda on hold until we get a new president elected in 2020. So the tax bill worries me. Yeah, I know that it's been Paul Ryan's dream since he was a boy to cut entitlements and programs for the elderly and the needy. So that's something I think we say that elections have consequences. This is a consequence of that. It's going to hurt. We need to continue to fight it. And I think, again, we delayed this tax bill for so long. We stopped most of the damage being done from to our healthcare system. They still were able to do a little bit through this tax bill by repealing the individual mandate. It's going to hurt. We can delay. I think we can work hard to delay it, and then we all need to elect Democratic congressmen and Democratic leaders in 2018, so that way they can put the Paul Ryan agenda on hold.
Right. There's almost like two worldviews battling for a segment of the voters. And I'm thinking about like the white working class voters in Wisconsin and Michigan, Paul Ryan country, where the Ayn Randers readers of the world are like, bootstrap, every person for himself. It's a rat race out there and take care of your own, versus the Hillary Clinton, it takes a village, the idea that no man is an island, the progressive ideals that we raise all boats, right? Is that something you agree with? And if that's the case, how do we communicate the shared values among the people who could have an affinity for the Democratic message?
Well, people are starting to see the value of that idea now that someone's trying to take it away from them. The Affordable Care Act has never had the approval ratings that it has now that the Republican Party is trying to repeal it and take health care away from people. You saw through the Affordable Care Act 10 years ago, the thought of being protected if you have a pre-existing condition, that was just something that people lived with. You didn't get insurance. The thought of keeping your kids on your health care until they were 26, all these other reforms that we saw come through the Affordable Care Act, none of that was commonly accepted like it is now. So we see some of these progressive ideas commonly being accepted by men and women of every political party across the country now. They realize, yeah, if my kid's born with cancer or something like that, if he has some kind of childhood disease, I don't want that to affect him for the rest of his life and he can't get access to health care. That makes sense. That's a nonpartisan issue. And I think it's finally becoming a nonpartisan issue. Unfortunately, it's taken one political party trying to strip that away from them for people to see the value in that. So I think I've said this before, the Donald Trump presidency is going to go down as a footnote in history that we all hope to forget about. It saddens me that it took us getting to here to realize that there are some things that are worth fighting for. I think we realize now that healthcare is one of those things that's worth fighting for, and everybody sees the value in that. And that's why I'm confident in 2018 or 2020, we'll see a single-payer system enacted in this country. Whether that starts with a public option where every man or woman can buy into Medicare, or we see the fully fledged Medicare for All bill that they have now. We'll see something that moves us in that direction, and people are going to want it because people want access to healthcare. They want access to quality healthcare, not only for them, but for their kids. So I think you see us kind of moving in that direction now, that progressive ideas they're popular ideas. Because they're good ideas for the common good. We have to do a better job at communicating them. And I know a big issue that we run into a lot of times that for a lot of these progressive ideas, they cost money. So we need to communicate better on how we're going to pay for these things.
Right. Yeah, as you were talking, I was thinking about, the Marine background again of being goal-oriented, and Mel Gibson in this movie of the Revolutionary War where he goes, aim small,
Miss Small.
miss small. Like if you don't have a goal, a big goal that you're shooting for, you're not going to hit the target. And this is a big goal, healthcare for all, right? And we need to be able to talk about it in ways that resonate. Before we run out of time, what's another issue, maybe an issue that would impact the people in your district?
So broadband internet access, that's one. Healthcare, education, the economy were issues that were extremely important to me when I decided to run. And then once I started listening to the people of the district, I realized that broadband internet in 2007 to almost 2018 is still a huge problem. It is something that's restricting education opportunities for kids. I've heard stories of kids who need to go to the public library to do their homework, to sit in the parking lot of a McDonald's to access the Wi-Fi because they can't do their homework from home. Small business owners who can't start businesses because they don't have the infrastructure in their home, the Wi-Fi to do it, or the high-speed internet to do it. That's something, again, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, nobody likes slow internet.
Right.
That's something we can all agree on. That's something that's extremely important. If we can address that issue.
So how do we address it? Do we have municipal broadband, or do we have incentives for more competition among the private ISPs?
So unfortunately, I hoped Governor McAuliffe would have vetoed this bill, but there's a bill passed in the legislature this year that prevented local municipalities from providing those services cheaper than what somebody in the private sector would do. I was hoping that would get vetoed because, again, in some areas where there's not a lot of people, a company's not going to go and provide those services because they're not going to make money there. They're going to lose money if they're only bringing internet to 10 people. That doesn't mean that those people don't need those services. And if a municipality is able to do that, because, again, we fight to get water and electricity and these other vital services out to people who need them, they should be able to do so, but they're not able to now. So that's something I think that we can repeal. We can allow our municipalities to provide those services instead of holding them back like we're doing now. And I talk about this a lot too. We need a 21st century infrastructure bill. So that's more than just bridges and roads. That needs to include pushing broadband internet out to every household in America. We were able to do it with electricity at the start of the 20th century. That's something that we need to continue to do now. So tying my idea would be any infrastructure bill, we tie a fixed percentage of that, the overall funding for that bill, towards pushing broadband internet access to every home in America. And it's a problem that definitely needs money, and it's something we need to stop looking at high-speed internet as a luxury. It's a commodity and a utility now. It's something that people need increasingly in their daily lives.
All right. Well, we're out of time. Thank you, Edwin.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me.
You bet.